Let me take you through how to find a percentage of an amount both without a calculator and with a calculator. So these could appear on either paper in your Maths GCSE. First of all, there are 4 key things that we need to remember. And so to find 50%, we actually have to divide it by 2 because it's half of 100%, the whole number. To find 25%, well, 25 is the same as a quarter because it is half of the 50%. So to find a quarter, we need to divide by 4. 10% is a tenth of 100%, therefore we need to divide it by 10. And to find 1%, we're dividing it by 100 because it's 100th of the whole 100%. You must remember these key facts going forward because these are the bare bones of how we find the percentage of any amount. If you just remember those 4, you can find any percentage. So divide by 2 for 50%, divide by 4 for 25%, divide by 10 for 10%, and divide by 100 for that 1%. And it all is how it links in with the 100%. Now we've got that sorted, we can use that to find the percentage of any amount. Let's start with the number 80, and let's say that we want to find 35% of 80, so 35%. So taking the number 80, 10% is going to be 80 divided by 10, which is 8. 30%, we need that 3 times because there's 3 10s in 30, which gives us 24. And then the 5% is the 1% times by 5. Or half of 10% is also 5%. If you've got 10%, if we halve that, that will give us our 5%. So 4 is going to be 5%. If we add together the 24 and the 4, that gives us 28. We then have the 35% in total. 30% plus 5% gives you 35%. So they're ways that you can build up to make any percentages. If I wanted 24%, I could find 25% and then I could subtract 1% from it. That would give me my 24%. So 25%, let's take the number 120 this time. 25%, I'm dividing it by 4, which is going to be 30. And I'm subtracting 1%, which is going to be 1.2. So my final answer would be 28.8, okay? So we can build it up in loads of different ways. So that is your non-calculator method. Let's have a go at some GCSE questions based on that. So 50% of 410, you need to know that to find 50%, it's a half, which is the same as divided by 2. This was a 1-mark question. So we're doing 410 divided by 2. Half of 410 is equal to 205. 10% of 170, to find 10%, you divide it by 10. So 170 divided by 10 gives you 17. Once again, another 1-mark question. Now this time it's 3 marks because we have to start to break it down a little bit more. 35% of 1,200. So how can you make 35%? Well, 35% is the same as 10% 3 times with another 5% added in there. So 10% is divided by 10, 120, another 120 and another 120. I'm actually going to find 5% by halving that 10%, which is going to be 60. And if we add those together, we end up with 420. So 35% of 1,200 is 420. Another method that you could do this is converting it into a fraction. So 35% is the same as 35 hundredths. That is 35%. Percent is out of 100. And you're finding that of 1,200. So some people do it as a multiplication of effectively fractions. So that's just another way to be aware of. Okay, some more applied GCSE questions then for this. So 70% of a number is 350, work out 120% of the number. Now I've put this one in here because it's slightly different and there will be a whole video based on reverse percentages, but I thought it's important to also put them side by side so you can see the difference. Now this is not asking you for 70% of 350, it's telling you 70% of a number is 350. So 70% of a number, we don't know what the number is, but we know that it's equal to 350, and it wants you to work out 120% of that number. Now the best way I find of doing this is you need to work out what 1% is or 10%, and in this case 10% is going to work. So if 70% is 350, we need to divide that by 7, because 70 divided by 7 is 10, to find out what 10% is. And if we're dividing the percentage by it, we need to do the same to the actual numbers. 350 divided by 7 is going to be 50. Now we know what 10% is. How do we go from 10% to 120? We're going to multiply it by 12. And 50 times by 12 is 600. So there we go, 120% of the number is 600. Don't get confused, it's not asking you to find 70% of that number, okay? There will be another complete video on percentage problems. Right, all the students at a school are asked what they prefer, science or English. So in year 11, we have 240 students in total and 45% of them prefer that science. In other years, 980 students in total, and that's 20% of the students prefer science. So it's popular in year 11. What is the difference? Now let's get the keywords here. What is the difference between the number of students who preferred science in year 11 compared with the other years? We need to know first how many students preferred science in year 11 and how many students preferred science in the other years. So we need 45% of 240 and we need 20% of 980. So let's get going on that to start with. So 10% of 240 is 24. We're dividing it by 10. 40% is going to be times that by 4. So we're doing 24 times by 4, which is 96, just timesing it by 4. 5% is half of that 10%, so that's 12. And then we need to add together the 40% and the 5% to get that total answer, giving us 108. So 108 people in year 11 most preferred science. Bigger or smaller than 20% of 980, and we need to calculate that difference. 10% of 980 is going to be 98, therefore 20% is going to be 196. Right, now we can compare them. So we're comparing the 108 and the 196 to find the difference between them. That difference is the subtraction is 196, subtract 108. And it's 88 in total is the difference for those 4 marks. Right, so that's non-calculator method. Let's now move on to how we're going to do this in a calculator method. There's 2 key things that we need to be able to do here. First of all is to input the percentage in some way into your calculator, and then we need to multiply it by 254. Now there's various ways of putting 87% into your calculator. I guess the easiest way is if you have a percentage button, you can just do 87 and then the percentage button is above that bracket, look, times by 254. That's your first way. Fraction to decimal, or change the format in order to work that out as a decimal as opposed to a fraction. Right. So if your calculator has a percentage button, that's your easiest way, but not all calculators do. Other ways of putting in 87% is by a fraction. 87%, the percent means out of 100, so you can just put 87 hundredths times by 254 to get the same answer. And other people actually write it as a decimal, so 0.87 multiplied by 254 to give you exactly the same answer of 220.98. So 0.87 times by 224 equals 220.98. So the 3 methods there, you can do it as a percentage straight away, as a fraction, or as a decimal. The next one, 24.2%. This time I'm going to do it as a fraction. So we write 24.2 and it's percent, so it's out of 100. And we're going to times it by 811. Remember, it's always the multiply by, okay? Giving us an answer of 196.262. And that would be all you'd need for your marks. I would always recommend writing out exactly what you've typed into your calculator because it's good practice. If this has helped you, please subscribe, like the video, and I'll see you in the next one.